specific subject. We have to go back to our school years in order to remember some mathematical equations. And believe me, that's a struggle for me. I can get along quite fine with the multiplication table, but and division. Okay, I got that, but that's basic mathematics, and I'm only good with that. Bringing back to mind that. What other challenges might we be facing apart from not having the content knowledge? I think that it goes, yeah.
I think the second problem is the art of designing the material.
Okay, yeah, this is true, and it's also the language level. Actually, I'm going to reveal them all, because more or less what you mentioned comes into contact with what it is that we're going to be describing right now. These are the sort of difficulties that we might be facing. The language level, because if we noticed in the quiz that before the first slide, that there were some unknown words if we were to do this, to assign this quiz for our students, right? Heard before. Probably students might not be familiar with that specific word. For us, we can make the connection, probably the word heard led us to give the correct response in that. But of course, this means that we need to communicate activities like this to the students in such a way as to not make the activities intimidating for them, not to make them feel scared about what it is that we're going to be doing. And yes, sometimes we lack the materials, right? I mean, like we don't have the necessary tools in order to be able to incorporate a clear lesson, have a clear approach in class. So we end up being in a world like this teacher here, right, more or less, and having to fit these pieces of the puzzle together in order to get that clear approach to the language, as you see here. Where, yes, the language teacher tries to make use of everything. However, in order to somehow pave the way on how we can make the clear lesson applicable in class, we've got this framework as it is being presented here, which is called the 4 C's. 4 C's are a framework that pave the way for a clear lesson. Now, I want you, in the groups that you are, or actually we can do that orally right now, discover what these 4 C's stand for and contribute to such a great extent when we put the pieces of the puzzle together to have a clear lesson. In order to make things a bit easier, I'm going to give the definition to what each C stands for. So I would like you to try to figure out now what each C stands for here in this situation. The 4 C's that provide the framework for the lesson. On a Saturday morning, it's hard. That's what I think, yeah. So, any clues about the first one? Any ideas what the first one might stand for? Subject knowledge. What comes to mind? We talked about it before. In this. It is content. Exactly. What about the second one? Thinking skills. Critical thinking, yes, is what is, let's say, the core part of what this C stands for. It's critical thinking. Actually, it defines it, as cognitive, right? Cognition. Third, number 3? Cooperation, communication. I think these more or less come together, right? I mean, like, you cooperate, you communicate. They both start with a C.
Yeah.
I'm pretty fine with that. And what about the last one?
Culture.
Since it talks about being aware of other societies and showing respect for others by learning
Culture.
things about different cultures, yes, definitely those
Yeah,
stand for all this. Content, cognition, communication,
and
culture. Critical thinking and cooperation is just fine. Okay? So, these are the 4 C's that when we put them together, they contribute to a clear lesson. They help us elevate, as I consider it, an elevation for our lesson, to have a clear lesson. We're going to see why it's elevating our approach to the English language through these, as we go through these 4 C's more thoroughly. So, the content, as we mentioned before, every lesson. This is something that I would say is more or less into context with what every lesson is all about. Whatever it is that you are teaching, you need to have certain teaching objectives. You need to have these crystal clear, because it helps you set the aims and be able to communicate the aims of your lesson. This brings along also how much time I am going to devote in a 45-minute lesson for every specific activity. This is really important in the sense that you know how you're going to organize your lesson. When you know that apart from telling your students that you have to do this and this specific activity, you explain them, let's say, the rubric of the activity, you also must have in mind a plan, a time schedule of your lesson in every specific activity. How much you're going to devote for the drill, how much you're going to devote for the warm-up questions, how many students you're going to ask, in order to have, let's say, an idea. I know as a teacher, things are rough in a class, and things can easily go out of hand, especially when you are having a big group of students. Still, a time, schedule always helps you take control of the lesson and have the opportunity to see how you're going to make those teaching objectives turn into learning outcomes, have the desired outcomes, which is what the students are going to benefit from this specific lesson. Now let's go. This is something that is also in connection with what we do in a clear lesson as in any typical lesson. We need to have the teaching objectives crystal clear for our students. I'm going to go to the second C, and this is what clear lessons contribute to. It's not only the clear lessons, I'm pretty sure that any task-based learning activity contributes to this. We're focusing on clear right now. So, thinking skills and how they are cultivated. So let's see what we can employ right now in order to be able to make these critical thinking skills sprout in an ELT classroom. What we see here, are we familiar with Bloom's revised taxonomy, Benjamin Bloom's taxonomy? Came up with this with a fellow educational psychologist back in the 50s or 60s or something. He was an educational psychologist, and he came up with this taxonomy of learning. As we reach the summit of the pyramid, and as we go upwards, we reach the highest point of cultivating those higher order thinking skills, which is all about creativity. Now, this is wonderful in theory. The question is how this can be a part of my lesson. How can I employ these and see how I can make use of this theory and develop it into, actually cut it down to practical tips, suggestions in my lesson, to be employed in my lesson. Let's take a look at one of our lessons right now. This is an extract, this is a lesson taken from one of our series, Get Smart Plus, and you can see that we have clear subjects. This is something that we have in all our course books right now, but we've selected one of our course books for this. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure that this is something that we are all familiar with, right?
Yeah.
It's the typical lesson, one-page lesson that we have. It starts off with the vocabulary, the new vocabulary, the target vocabulary, followed by the text, and of course, the reading comprehension, and I can see a bit of grammar there also, right? Activity. We're not rediscovering America here, for sure, right? This is something that we are all familiar with. We notice, though, that this is connected with a clue subject. It's content that has been taken from another subject, because it is looking at two types of camels that exist. The Arabian and the Bedouin. Now, the vocabulary here is useful. We emphasize in introducing this vocabulary because it's got words that are going to be really useful for students to understand the context. And these words that have to do with the description of a camel. This is a low level, so they are introduced also to the word camel. What it consumes, and how it is also, let's say, used, taken advantage of by people, right? How important it is for people, and how it helps people in their lives. I mean, like, you live in a culture that camels are a very important animal historically, right, in this region. One of them, actually, because the other one is located somewhere different, right? So, the question is now, how can I put this into this? Right. Okay, this is wonderful. Normally, what we would do, we would start off with introducing the vocabulary and get the students to listen, or read the text, and of course do the activity. And this is just fine. This is one way of doing it. But, I mean, if I want to move on up a bit higher in this ladder, right? We want to, not go, we're going to be using the book. It is our main tool to have our lesson, but we don't want to necessarily go by the book, right? In the sense that there are so many different ways through which we can exploit this knowledge that has been gained from this specific text and make these activities also a bit more stimulating for the students to start, talking in English and doing their own research and trying to find ways through which this lesson can be much more useful and lead on up to the summit of the pyramid. So, I want you to take a look at these two texts, and something that I would do, for example here, is try to see how I can trigger my students to concentrate a bit more. We've got students who are really motivated. I mean, we're all teachers, and we know that there are those students who are more attentive to the lesson, and there are students who, they do not really pay attention. Those students probably need to be triggered a bit more. So, what ways can we think of getting this lesson to be a bit more, motivating students, those who are reluctant to participate, a bit more motivated? This is a reading text, but can we integrate other skills here? Like, let's say, devote 2 minutes to transform this reading activity into something else. Any ideas? Yeah. Drawing is one thing. Ask them to draw a camel, right? And why not make use of that vocabulary up there to see how it is represented? Or have them draw an action of the camel, right? With a person dragging it or putting things on it. One thing is that. Yes?
Between these two camels, yes.
Comparing. Wonderful. Making a comparison between the two animals that are shown here, between the two camels that are shown here. Yes. I would go as something a bit more simple than I'm pretty sure a lot of you are doing in class. I would, do you make use of interactive whiteboards? Do you have, like data show in your class? If you have that, for example, you can click on the text and have only the images appear, not the text, and you can transform this into a listening activity. What I like to do is ask a triggering warm-up question before they go into reading the text, in order to get the students not to listen to everything and remember everything that is being heard from what I'm going to be playing, but try to respond to that question. This is like a listening activity, but it is a way of helping students also who find it, who struggle a bit with listening, because they don't have the anxiety of filling in the blank or writing the true or false. All they have to do is listen to the question that you ask and try to extract the information, the necessary information, in order to give you the answer. So this is a way also of cultivating listening as well. I'm very happy with what you mentioned regarding the ideas, because let's see now how we can implement Bloom's taxonomy and see some practical tips through which that specific text can be in sync with what we talk about with Bloom's taxonomy. So you can see here that I have listed the components of the pyramid, right? So I want you to think of questions that have to do with the lowest order thinking skills. The lowest, which is remember. What would be a question of that would belong to the lower order thinking skills? Remember, we have to remember something that has
Come on, give us ideas. Don't be shy. Only the gentleman is speaking.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's related to new vocabulary.
Okay, really.
That's on the top of the page.
Please
Wonderful.
to the microphone.
It can be related to new vocabulary.
Yes.
Anybody else?
Anybody else?
They have to remember. They read the text, so they have to remember something, right?
For example, ask a question, for example, which animal, the true false question, for example. The Arabian camel has got two humps, for example. True false.
True or false?
Very easy.
Exactly.
Remember it.
Exactly. Good. Let me reveal the first one. Can you name the two types of camels? It's something that usually we do in reading comprehension activities, right? So, the simple question is taking a look at the text, and they have to remember the names of the two camels, or remember something else from the text. This does not require much thinking, right? This is why it's located in the bottom of the pyramid. That's remember. Because all the students have to do is just skim through the text, actually only take a look at the title of the two titles, let's say, of the text, and see what the answer is in this occasion. Now let's move a bit higher, one level higher. Understanding. We're still in the lower order thinking skills. In order to help you, it is a question that we can find in those reading comprehension activities that follow reading text. But it requires something extra. It's not only about finding the answer as it is presented. It's also about, showing that you have understood the lesson.
The differences maybe?
Yeah.
Any ideas? We have some late comers because there are two atlases. And some teachers went together. So they're coming together. Any ideas? Come on. Participate. This is not a lecture. We need your ideas.
And
How
there are
would
no
you,
wrong ideas.
what would a question you will ask your students to see if they understood the text? Yes?
Say the difference between the two like comparison. Say the difference between the first one and the second one.
Actually, spot on. Yeah. Which one of the two has a hump? Right. See the differences. So, in this situation, they have to go through the text and based on the content, how each camel is being described, they have to extract that information which responds to this question. So this shows comprehension of that text. Now, we're moving to the third level. All right? It's like a skyscraper, moving on up. We're on the verge of, we're almost touching those higher order thinking skills. And we're actually, this is a connection. So, applying, let's say, more or less the knowledge that we gain from that specific text. Yeah?
Maybe in this stage, we should apply what they have done in understanding and learning. For example, you can draw the first comma and the second. Yes.
Something that you mentioned before, describe an animal or draw it. This is an activity that employs also what has been introduced in vocabulary through the text, and actually gets the students to work a specific activity, work on a skill that probably they are much in favor of doing, like drawing, and make use of it. Or have a song. Think of a song that describes camels. This is more or less like a way of getting them to apply the knowledge that they have. Moving a bit more up, now we're reaching the higher order thinking skills. Analyzing. So there is analysis there, right? So it's not only about sticking to that text.
Analyze, focus on something specific. For example, you can see which one is wrong, which one is wrong, and for example, the hair of each one.
Okay.
You can compare.
Like a comparison, exactly. Comparison between the two. Now, why is this considered a higher order thinking skill? Because here the students have to decide which are the adjectives that segregate, distinguish make the difference, show the differences between the two camels here, right? So this is a way of getting them to cultivate those higher order thinking skills. Something practical in order to map this somehow, in order to show it through mapping, is the Venn diagram. I always like to use the Venn diagram here in this situation, which shows how they can decide which are the differences and what those two camels probably might have in common. Right, but this is a higher order thinking skill because it's not only on responding to a specific question, it's having a general idea of the text, being able to